Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take complex topics, dig into the information, and really help you get well informed quickly.
Exactly.
And today we are launching something new. Welcome to the very first deep dive of the UX Cast.
That's right. And for our inaugural deep dive in the series, we're unpacking two concepts absolutely fundamental to the digital products you use, well, every single day. User interface design
UI.
and user experience design,
Yeah.
UX. They're terms you hear constantly, right?
Yes.
Often used interchangeably. But understanding their distinct roles and, gosh, how they rely on each other is absolutely critical in our digital world.
It really is. If you've ever used a website or an app and thought, why is this so difficult? Or maybe, wow, this just works. You've experienced UI and UX in action. So our mission today is to pull back the curtain a bit. We'll explore what UX and UI actually mean, where these ideas surprisingly came from,
Yeah, the history is fascinating.
how designers use them to build products, tackle some stubborn myths, see how they look different in maybe a fast-moving startup versus a huge enterprise.
Totally different world sometimes.
Check out some real-world examples like Netflix and Airbnb, and even offer some practical insights if you're thinking about getting into this field.
Get ready for some moments where things just, click into place.
Okay, let's dive straight in. We've got a lot of ground to cover here. Let's start with the foundation. When we talk about user experience or UX design, what are we really talking about at its core?
Okay, user experience design. It's really the strategic discipline focused on the entire journey a person has when interacting with a product, a system, or even a service. It's not just the screen.
Right.
It's everything that shapes how you feel and what you can actually accomplish when you use something.
Okay, so it's the whole picture then. The
Ah.
feeling, the flow, the outcome, all of it.
Exactly. Don Norman, a real pioneer in cognitive science, he solidified the term user experience back in the late 90s while he was at Apple.
Ah, Apple.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. He defined it really broadly as all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. And the ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, they put it formally as a person's perceptions and responses that result from the use or anticipated use of a product, system, or service.
Perceptions and responses. That sounds like it's really about making it easy, intuitive, maybe even enjoyable to use.
Precisely. It's fundamentally about solving user problems and making sure a product is intuitive, easy, and, yes, enjoyable. It goes way beyond just whether something works technically. It's about deeply understanding user needs, their behaviors, their motivations. The guiding principle always is putting the user first.
So UX is deeply human-centered problem solving at its heart.
Yes. And there's this crucial concept often summarized by the three uses. For a product to really succeed, it has to be useful. It actually helps you do something you need to do.
Yeah.
It must be usable so it's easy to figure out how to do it.
Right.
And critically, it needs to be consistently used. Because, a product can tick the boxes for useful and usable, but if it doesn't fit into people's lives in a way that leads to regular use, well, it ultimately fails in the real world and for the business.
Yeah, that used aspect.
Yeah.
That's where the business viability really kicks in, isn't it? A truly successful product gets adopted and people stick with it.
That's such a key point. And there are other principles guiding UX too, like relevance to the user, accessibility for everyone, super important, consistency, having a clear information hierarchy,
Hierarchy, okay.
aligning with user mental models. That's how they expect things to work, based on past experiences, giving users control, understanding their context, minimizing cognitive loads so they don't have to think too hard.
Keep it simple.
Exactly, and constantly seeking feedback. So the UX designer's core job is really understanding that full user journey. They're asking, what is the real problem this product needs to solve for the user? And what essential features and functions are needed to solve it effectively? It's deeply rooted in fields like, cognitive psychology and human-computer interaction. It requires a strong sense of empathy.
Okay, so UX is the big picture strategy, the user journey, the problem solving, the structure, the why, and the overall how it feels. So then what about UI? User interface design.
Right. UI design is a specialized discipline that sits within that broader umbrella of UX design. It focuses specifically on crafting the visual and interactive layer of a digital product.
Digital only.
Yeah. It's literally everything a user sees and touches on a screen. The layout, the colors, the fonts, the buttons, icons, how elements are spaced, the imagery, all of that.
So UI is strictly digital then. You wouldn't talk about designing the UI of, say, a physical TV remote control.
That's correct. UI refers specifically to that point of interaction with a digital device or software. The main goal of UI design is to create interfaces that are, well, both visually appealing and intuitive to navigate.
Making it look good and work well.
Exactly, making it easy and pleasant for users to complete their tasks. You're thinking about things like input controls buttons, text fields, output elements like notifications, and helper components, maybe tooltips. Consistency across all the screens is vital, and that's often enforced through style guides or full-blown design systems.
Right, so it looks and feels the same everywhere.
Precisely. And adherence to accessibility guidelines like WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, is absolutely non-negotiable. You have to ensure users with different abilities can interact properly with the interface.
I encounter different kinds of interfaces all the time. The graphical ones on my phone, but also voice interfaces like Alexa or Siri, even gesture controls. Is that all covered by UI?
Yes, UI definitely encompasses those too. While graphical user interfaces, GUIs, are probably the most common thing we think of, the field absolutely adapts to other interaction modes like command line interfaces, voice user interfaces, VUIs, and gesture-based interfaces.
Okay.
So the UI designer's role, essentially, is to take the structure and the research from the UX process and translate that into a visually compelling and interactive reality. And while aesthetics are involved, the primary goal of UI is always functionality and enabling that user experience. A stunning interface is, frankly, useless if users can't figure out how to use it. So UI serves the larger UX goals directly.
That makes perfect sense. So UX is the strategic foundation, the whole experience, the flow, the problem being solved. And UI is the tangible, visual, interactive layer on the digital product, the paint, the buttons, the layout that makes it navigable and appealing. How do they actually work together then?
Well, they are distinct disciplines, but they're just inextricably linked. They absolutely have to work hand in hand. Think of it with an analogy, maybe. A UI without UX is like a painter just slapping paint onto a canvas without any underlying sketch or idea. It might look colorful, sure, but it has no structure or purpose for the viewer.
Right, just random paint. And UX without UI.
That's kind of like the structural frame of a sculpture with no material covering it. You have this brilliant underlying form and intention, but there's nothing tangible for the user to actually see or interact with. Both are completely essential for a successful product.
That analogy really helps clarify the relationship. Okay, so to break down the key differences we're seeing, UX focuses on the overall journey, the psychology of the user, the problem-solving aspect.
Yeah, I agree.
While UI focuses on the visuals, the interactivity, the look and feel of that digital interface itself.
Precisely. UX aims for a seamless, valuable, problem-solving experience overall. UI aims for aesthetically pleasing and intuitive interfaces specifically. And UX has that broader scope, right? It encompasses the entire interaction, digital or not, while UI is specific only to digital products.
And typically in the product development process, the UX work, defining the structure and flow, that happens earlier, right? Well, the UI work sort of builds on that to create the final visual layer.
That's generally the flow, yeah. Their deliverables reflect this too. UX provides things like user personas, journey maps, those wireframes we mentioned, prototypes showing structure and flow. UI, on the other hand, delivers high-fidelity mock-ups, detailed visual designs, style guides, UI kits that define the precise look and feel.
Got it.
Their tools differ too, although there's definitely overlap. UX uses things like data analysis tools, research platforms. UI relies heavily on visual design software like Figma, Sketch, Adobe XD. But crucially, there are overlapping activities like user research, wireframing, prototyping, where both roles collaborate deeply. UX provides the blueprint, and UI makes that blueprint a navigable, visually engaging reality.
Okay, that really lays out the core distinction and the connection clearly. It all sounds very modern, though, tied to computers and apps. But are these concepts truly new? Or do they have, deeper roots somewhere?
That's one of the most fascinating things. The principles of user-centered design aren't digital inventions at all. They have incredibly deep historical roots, actually predating computers by millennia.
Millennia, seriously, that's surprising.
Absolutely. You can see early echoes in ancient Chinese philosophy like Feng Shui from around 4000 BC. It's all about organizing environments for harmony and flow.
Okay.
Which, in a way, shares the goal of creating a user-friendly, comfortable space just applied to physical spaces instead of digital ones.
Huh. So arranging my desk or living room for optimal flow is kind of like ancient UX.
You could definitely look at it that way. And even more directly, back in ancient Greece, around 500 BC, Hippocrates described the ideal layout for a surgeon's workspace. He stressed that tools should be within easy reach, that's pure ergonomics, an early understanding of usability and efficiency for a human interacting with their tools.
Wow, okay. Framing it like that totally shifts the perspective. These are fundamental human concerns about how we interact with our environment and our tools, not just digital stuff.
Precisely. The core principles of designing for people are ancient. The technology just changes the medium. Moving closer to the modern era, you have the Bauhaus movement in 1919 Germany, with its famous principle, form follows function. That was essentially advocating for usability-based design. The design should serve the purpose, not just look pretty.
Right.
And industrial designers like Henry Dreyfuss in the 1950s were explicit about designing products, I think phones, tractors, to be safer, more comfortable, more desirous of purchase, more efficient, or just plain happier for the user.
That sounds exactly like modern UX goals. It's uncanny.
It really is. And you even see philosophical shifts in industry mirroring this. Frederick Winslow Taylor's early 20th century scientific management focused on making workers fit the tools, very efficiency-driven. But later, Toyota's production system in the mid-20th century took a different tack, integrating worker input and aiming to make tools and processes conform to the workers. That move towards fitting the system to the human is a direct precursor to user-centered design thinking.
That shift, fitting the system to the human, not the other way around, feels like a major turning point in thinking. When did this start explicitly entering the digital realm then?
The 1950s were really key. Bell Labs hired the first psychologists specifically to work on telephone design. They conducted user studies for things like the push-button keypad layout, a layout that's still incredibly familiar today.
Wow.
At the same time, cognitive science began to formalize our understanding of how humans perceive things, remember, make decisions. Paul Fix's 1954 Fitts Law, which predicts how quickly you can move a pointer to a target based on its size and distance.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
It's still absolutely fundamental to UI design for things like button placement on a screen. And George Miller's 1956 work highlighting the limits of our working memory, the magic number 7 plus or minus 2, directly influenced how we present information in interfaces, trying not to overload people.
So it wasn't just an art anymore. It was really becoming a science grounded in psychology and human physiology.
Exactly. Then came the personal computer revolution. Xerox PR Art in the 1970s was just groundbreaking. They invented the graphical user interface, GUI, the mouse, object-oriented programming, essentially laying the groundwork for all modern computing interfaces.
And the Apple Macintosh in '84 was the first mass-market computer to really bring that GUI to everyday people, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. And its success proved something fundamental. Ease of use could be a major competitive advantage. It could be a primary reason people would buy a product. Steve Jobs really demonstrated that usability drives sales.
Yeah, he definitely hammered that home.
And this commercial success led directly to the formal recognition of user experience as a critical factor. As we mentioned, Don Norman, who was working on this stuff at Apple, coined the term user experience and even changed his title to User Experience Architect in 1993, trying to capture this broader concept beyond just the interface itself.
So we've gone from ancient ergonomics to industrial design, scientific study, the digital revolution with PARC and Apple, and finally formalizing the term user experience in the late 90s. How is the field still evolving today? It feels like it's moving faster than ever.
Oh, absolutely. The 2010s saw UX really solidify as a core business function, with companies building out dedicated teams. Now it's evolving at light speed with all the new technologies. AI and machine learning are driving personalization and automation in interfaces in huge ways.
Like Netflix recommendations.
Exactly. Voice and conversational UIs like Alexa and Siri are becoming common interaction methods. Augmented and virtual reality are blending digital and physical experiences, which requires entirely new design approaches.
Designing for a VR environment must be a completely different challenge than designing for a flat screen, right?
It absolutely is a whole different set of considerations. There's also a massive push, thankfully, for inclusive and accessible design, making sure products work for people of all abilities. Micro-interactions, those little subtle animations you see when you click a button or refresh a page, they're used strategically to provide feedback and make interfaces feel more responsive.
Yeah, those little touches make a difference.
They really do. Mobile-first design is pretty much standard now. And designing for seamless cross-platform experiences is essential. Plus, data-driven UX using analytics and A/B testing is crucial for constant refinement. And increasingly, ethical UX is a major focus considering the societal impact, privacy, data security implications of the design choices we make.
Wow. It sounds like designers need to constantly learn and adapt. There's no standing still.
Without question. They're designing for multimodal interactions now, not just screens. And while those foundational principles we discussed remain absolutely key, you are seeing specialization emerge, designers focusing specifically on AI UX or VR UX or voice interfaces. The growing emphasis on ethical design also shows the field's maturity, grappling with its responsibility in shaping how technology impacts society.
It's definitely a dynamic and expanding field. Okay, so let's get practical. How do UI and UX designers actually contribute during the process of building a product?
Yeah.
What do their roles and processes look like day to day?
Right. They work throughout the product development lifecycle, often in distinct, but as we said, deeply collaborative ways. The UX design process is typically an iterative journey. It really starts with a crucial strategic step, defining and aligning objectives.
Okay.
This means balancing what the users need with what the business needs. You're brainstorming the product's core purpose, its value proposition, identifying the specific user problems it aims to solve, and understanding the project's resources and timelines. It's about strategic thinking first.
So figuring out why we're building this thing and who it's really for before anything else.
Exactly. Then comes extensive researching users and their problems. This is where you validate your initial assumptions. You gather input directly from potential users through interviews, surveys, maybe observation, card sorting, lots of methods. You create user personas, these fictional representations of your target users, and map out their existing user flows or journeys to understand their current pain points.
Got it. So based on that deep understanding, then you start designing solutions.
Yes, then you move into the creating design solutions phase. This often starts broad with just quick sketching of ideas, then moves to wireframing those simplified, often grayscale layouts showing the basic structure and placement of elements on a screen, sometimes called gray boxing. You also define the information architecture, how all the content is organized and labeled so people can find it. Finally, you build prototypes. These are interactive versions of your design concepts, and they can range from low fidelity, like basic clickable wireframes, to high fidelity, which look and feel almost like the final product. This whole phase is about rapid experimentation, testing ideas quickly and cheaply.
Experimentation before committing all the resources to build the final thing. Makes sense.
Right, because the next critical step is to test designs with real users. You conduct usability testing sessions with those prototypes, observing actual users trying to complete key tasks. This helps you identify usability issues and verify whether your design actually meets user needs before you invest heavily in development. This is crucial risk mitigation.
Finding problems early is always better and cheaper than fixing them later.
Absolutely. So after testing, you implement changes and prepare for launch. You make the necessary tweaks based on testing and get ready for release. But the process isn't over at launch. Not by a long shot. The final phase is ongoing. Collect feedback and iterate. You continuously gather data after launch through analytics, direct user feedback, monitoring key performance indicators, KPIs. UX design isn't a one-time project. It's an ongoing process of refinement based on how real users interact with the live product. It's really an investment in the product's long-term success.
Okay, so UX maps out the strategy, the user needs, the structure, the flow, and constantly tests those assumptions. Where does UI fit into this journey more specifically?
So UI design works in parallel and builds directly upon that UX foundation, bringing the visual and interactive aspects to life. UI designers also often participate in conducting user research, especially to understand user preferences regarding visual and specific interaction patterns. They'll create initial sketches for screen layouts, and they work closely with the UX team's wireframes, sometimes creating their own more detailed wireframes or gray boxes to refine the layout before adding color and style.
So UI designers also think about layout and structure, not just the final pretty picture.
Definitely. A really core UI activity is component designing. This involved creating those reusable design elements we talked about, buttons, forms, navigation menus, and defining their various states, like how a button looks when you hover over it or click it. This is where style guides or larger design systems become absolutely critical for ensuring consistency, scalability, and efficiency across the entire product.
Right. That consistency makes interfaces feel so much more reliable and easier to learn, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. UI designers also work on establishing task flows or user flows visually. They map out exactly how a user navigates from one screen to the next, making sure that interactive experience is seamless. Then they create the high-fidelity designs, or mock-ups. These are the pixel-perfect visuals, the final screens with all the colors, typography, imagery, and layout exactly as they should appear in the finished product.
Okay, this is what people usually visualize when you say UI design, right? The polished screens.
Precisely. And they use these high-fidelity mock-ups to create the prototype. This is the interactive version that simulates the actual user flow and interactions, allowing for really realistic testing of the interface itself. Finally, there's the handoff. The complete prototypes, design specifications, visual assets, all that gets delivered to the developers who will actually build the product. Clear communication at this stage is absolutely vital to make sure what gets built matches the design intent.
So the UI process is kind of like translating that strategic UX blueprint into the tangible, visually interactive experience the user actually sees and touches.
That's a great way to put it. UI designers really are translators, turning those user-centered insights and structural definitions from UX into a working, aesthetically pleasing, and usable interface.
It really sounds like there's a lot of overlap and shared responsibility, though. It makes sense why you often see those UX UI designer job titles out there, especially maybe in smaller companies.
Yes, absolutely. They are, as we keep saying, closely related, distinct, but work together, and both are essential. In practice, particularly in startups or smaller teams, one person might indeed wear both hats. However, understanding the distinction between focusing on the overall problem and flow, the UX side, versus the specific digital interface details, the UI side, is really key, even if the roles are blended in one person. There's a truly symbiotic relationship. Robust UX research informs better UI decisions, and well-executed UI makes the intended UX possible and hopefully delightful. Truly effective product development relies on deep collaboration between these two perspectives, not just a handoff.
It's definitely a partnership. Now, in any field, this complex, common misunderstandings and myths tend to pop up. Let's try and dispel some of those. Myth number one seems pretty common. Accessibility is optional.
This myth is frustratingly persistent, and the reality is it's anything but optional. Accessible design means creating products that people with diverse abilities, including disabilities, can use effectively. And here's the key insight a lot of people miss. Building accessibility in from the very start is not some extra cost. It's actually an investment that's far cheaper than trying to bolt it on later. And it doesn't make your product ugly or harder for others to use. It makes it more inclusive and often, surprisingly, more innovative.
More innovative.
Yeah.
How so? That's interesting.
Well, designing for constraints often forces creative solutions. Think about features originally developed for accessibility, like screen readers or even dark mode options. They ended up benefiting a huge audience way beyond the initial target group. It expands your market reach by ensuring your product is usable by a wider group of people. It's really just a fundamental principle of good design and, frankly, good business.
Okay, so accessibility is essential, full stop. And it can even be profitable and drive innovation. Myth number two, UI UX design is only about the user.
Right. While the user is absolutely the primary focus, they can't be the sole focus. Successful products have to balance user needs with the company's business goals. The data shows that designing only for the user, completely ignoring business constraints or objectives, will inevitably lead to conflicts down the line. Users might request features that just aren't scalable or financially viable for the business to support. A skilled UX designer is also a strategic thinker and, honestly, a negotiator, finding that sweet spot between user desires and business realities.
Yeah, it has to work for both the person using it and the organization providing it. That makes sense. Okay, myth three, UI UX design is a one-time thing. You just finish it and launch it.
If only. This is a major misconception. UI UX is a continuous, iterative process. User behaviors change constantly, technology evolves, new competitors emerge. Your design is never truly finished. That post-launch feedback loop we discussed earlier in the UX process, it's absolutely critical. It requires a fundamental mindset shift towards continuous optimization, treating the product as something that is constantly being refined based on real-world use, not just a project with an end date.
It's more like an ongoing relationship with the user and the product, not a finished artifact. And the big myth we highlighted right at the start, UI and UX are interchangeable.
The most common one, for sure. As we've hopefully made clear by now, they are distinct but deeply complementary disciplines. This persistent confusion in the industry often leads to unrealistic job descriptions or misunderstandings of what each role actually entails and contributes. It really underscores the importance of educating stakeholders, managers, developers, everyone on the unique value that strong UI and strong UX both bring to the table.
Okay, let's tackle a couple of specific interaction myths. Myth 5, users hate scrolling. You hear this one a lot.
Yeah, it's funny. If users truly hated scrolling, things like infinite scroll feeds or, doom scrolling wouldn't be a thing. The issue isn't scrolling itself, it's bad scrolling experiences. Users will absolutely scroll if the content is valuable, engaging, and organized logically. The focus should be on creating intuitive, smooth navigation and a clear visual hierarchy that guides the user, not imposing arbitrary limits like trying to keep everything above the fold.
Right. It's about the experience of scrolling, the value you get, not the physical act itself.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us to myth 6. 3 clicks to everything is the best approach.
Ah, the infamous 3-click rule. This is a classic oversimplification of good design. Usability is not, and never was, measured by a rigid click count. This myth often stems from a misunderstanding or misapplication of early design heuristics. Look, a user might be perfectly happy to make 4 or even 5 clicks if each step along the way is intuitive, the path is clear, and they feel confident they are progressing towards their goal without confusion. Conversely, trying to force everything into 3 clicks can result in crammed, confusing interfaces that are actually harder to use. True usability comes from logical flows, clear information architecture, and meeting user expectations, not sticking to some arbitrary magic number.
Dispelling those myths is so important for getting design work done effectively. Now, does the reality of UI UX look different depending on where you work? How does it compare in, say, a nimble startup versus a massive enterprise?
Oh, it absolutely looks different. It's often driven by the fundamental differences in their core goals, their resources, and their operating environments. For startups, the core reality is usually navigating immense uncertainty and desperately seeking that elusive product-market fit.
Speed is absolutely paramount in that kind of environment, right? Get something out there fast.
It really is. Their design philosophy is typically built around speed, flexibility, and rapid experimentation. The focus is often on launching an MVP, a minimum viable product, as quickly as possible. The goal isn't perfection, it's to validate core hypotheses, test traction with real users, and learn fast rather than trying to build a perfect, feature-complete product from day one. Their key goals are usually validate assumptions quickly, reduce friction for those crucial early users, learn and iterate based on feedback, and often stand out quickly, perhaps through bold branding or a unique UI hook.
So what does that mean for the actual interfaces they build, typically?
Well, you'll often see much simpler user flows initially, fewer features, and maybe lightweight technology choices that enable that speed. Think of that initial fintech startup app example. Maybe a really smooth, fast onboarding process, just the essential sign-up steps, and only the core transaction features. They deliberately strip away complexity to gain momentum and learn what resonates. Their design process tends to be more flexible, less burdened by legacy systems or rigid processes, allowing for more innovative or experimental approaches, at least initially. Designers and startups are often deeply involved in defining the actual product strategy, not just painting the buttons. The major risk, though, is when a startup tries to prematurely mimic the structured, sometimes slower processes of a large enterprise. It can completely kill their agility, which is their main advantage.
Okay, so speed, validation, and learning are key for startups. What about the other end of the spectrum, the big enterprises?
Right. Enterprises are operating at a completely different scale. They usually have a large, established user base, complex organizational structures, and critical needs around compliance, security, and serving potentially very diverse user types within the same platform. Their design philosophy, therefore, has to center on scalability, security, and standardization. Key goals are things like maintaining reliability and trust with that large user base, serving multiple distinct user roles effectively, think administrators versus regular users versus power users, adhering to strict regulatory or compliance requirements, and ensuring the product can scale efficiently across maybe hundreds or thousands of internal users and teams without breaking.
So their interfaces must necessarily be much more complex, generally speaking.
Almost inevitably, yes. They often deal with complex user roles that require different views and permissions. They rely heavily on scalable design systems, these robust libraries of reusable components and strict UI patterns. These systems are crucial for ensuring consistency across a vast portfolio of products and features, and they also drive development efficiency significantly. Compliance-centric UX is often fundamental in sectors like finance or healthcare. Legal disclaimers, security checks, approval workflows are baked directly into user flows, and their interfaces often feature data-rich dashboards designed to provide users with the complex information and controls they need to do their jobs.
So startups prioritize agility and learning to find their footing, while enterprises prioritize stability efficiency, and scale to serve their existing base and manage complexity.
Exactly. And while enterprises obviously have more resources, their design teams often focus more on optimization and efficiency within existing mature products. This can sometimes make radical innovation a bit harder compared to a startup environment, just due to the scale and existing constraints. However, enterprises can definitely learn valuable things from startup mindsets, things like embracing more market research and usability testing earlier in the process, prioritizing user experience more aggressively even for internal tools, and being more willing to question established internal practices or best practices. The risk for an enterprise trying to mimic startup UX, conversely, is oversimplifying workflows that are necessarily complex, which can alienate experienced power users who rely on robust tools. The bottom line is the UI/UX approach must be tailored to the specific business context and scale.
And I imagine the structure of the design team itself must impact how all this plays out within the organization, right?
Oh, it certainly does. How a company organizes its designers affects everything from their daily work and collaboration patterns to their overall strategic influence. You tend to see a few common models. A centralized team often has all designers reporting up to one head of design or a single design manager. They might function like internal consultants, assigned to different product teams or projects as needed. The pros here are often broader exposure for designers to different parts of the business and easier collaboration and consistency among designers. The cons can sometimes be a lack of deep, long-term product-specific knowledge and potential resource bottlenecks if the central team is stretched thin. This model can work well in medium to large companies, especially those working on complex, interconnected projects.
And the opposite structure would be,
That's typically the decentralized or embedded model. In this setup, designers are placed directly within specific product teams, reporting to the product manager or engineering lead of that team. The big pros here are deep product knowledge, strong day-to-day relationships with the engineers and product managers they work with, and potentially faster integration of design into the development workflow. Cons can include a need for designers to constantly advocate for design principles within their team, a risk of feeling isolated from other designers in the company, and challenges in ensuring design collaboration and consistency across different product teams. This often works well in smaller organizations or in larger companies with very distinct independent product lines.
is there a middle ground, a blend of those?
Yes, that's the flexible or matrix model, which is increasingly common. It's essentially a hybrid approach. Designers are embedded within product teams for their daily project work, but they also report to a central UX manager or lead. This central lead provides guidance on overall design strategy, maintains design standards and systems, fosters the design community, and handles professional development. Pros here include high project involvement combined with better alignment to broader design strategy. Cons can sometimes be potential confusion or conflicting priorities due to that shared leadership structure, making decision-making a bit more complex sometimes. This structure is often found in large organizations that have a high degree of design maturity and recognize the value of both deep product focus and strategic design oversight. The team structure really shapes how integrated and ultimately how effective design can be within the company.
It's really clear that the organizational environment profoundly shapes the design process and priorities. Let's try and see these concepts in action now with some real-world examples. Netflix is often held up as like a masterclass in user-centered design.
They really are. Their incredible success is deeply intertwined with relentlessly putting the viewer experience first. And crucially, they use data extensively to understand their users, not just make assumptions about what people want.
What's a really standout example of Netflix's UX excellence that comes to mind?
Oh, my favorite, and maybe the most famous one, is the skip intro button. It seems like such a simple little feature, doesn't it? But it brilliantly solves a massive user frustration, especially for binge watchers who don't want to see the same opening credits over and over.
Oh yeah, I use that constantly.
Right. It gives the user direct control over a repetitive part of the experience, and Netflix's data showed it significantly increases watch time. It's become an industry standard now, basically expected. And there's a subtle but important UI detail that enhances the UX, its placement. When you're holding your phone horizontally to watch, the button typically appears in the upper right corner, conveniently placed right near where your thumb naturally rests for quick tapping.
That is brilliant. A small, thoughtful UI detail directly supporting a huge UX win. That's the synergy right there.
Yeah.
How else do they demonstrate this user focus?
Well, personalization is where they truly excel, I think. They use machine learning on a massive scale, analyzing your watch history, the time of day you watch, the device you're using, even how long you hover over a particular title card without clicking.
Wow, okay.
This data fuels features like the top picks for you row, the very specific because you watched
Wow.
rows, and crucially, those custom thumbnails you see, they actually test different thumbnail images for the same show to see which one is most likely to appeal to your specific viewing preferences based on your past behavior. It makes users feel incredibly understood and dramatically reduces the time spent endlessly scrolling, trying to find something to watch.
And the continue watching row, that always pulls me back in.
That's pure behavioral psychology and just great UX design. It creates a powerful commitment loop. It makes it absolutely effortless to pick up exactly where you left off, no matter which device you're using. It strongly encourages return visits and keeps you engaged with the content. Their vast content library, too, categorized into hyper-specific micro-categories way beyond traditional genres, also contributes to the user experience. It gives the impression of endless relevant content waiting for you and helps users avoid that feeling of decision paralysis when faced with too many choices.
And the interface itself, the UI, feels pretty slick too.
Yeah, the UI is generally incredibly clean, with clear categories and intuitive browsing patterns that feel familiar and consistent whether you're on your TV, your tablet, or your phone. They even personalize those dynamic thumbnails based on your viewing data or your region. Underlying all of this are core principles like simplicity, continuous A/B testing on pretty much every feature, strong accessibility features like robust subtitles and audio descriptions, and a really seamless multi-device experience.
So it sounds like a powerful combination of deep user empathy, a heavy reliance on data and testing, and just relentless continuous refinement. Even those seemingly small features like skip intro likely came from rigorous testing and data analysis.
Exactly. It's a highly sophisticated, data-driven cycle of research, design, testing, and iteration. It really shows how seemingly small UI and UX decisions can have a massive measurable impact on key business metrics like user engagement and retention.
What about Airbnb? They also have a reputation for strong design, but maybe you have an example there where they perhaps learned a lesson along the way.
Yes, Airbnb has certainly done some tremendous work, particularly in building a very robust design language system, their DLS. This is a major achievement for a company operating at their scale, and it provides a remarkably scalable and consistent experience globally. A strong DLS like theirs ensures brand consistency across all their platforms. It significantly accelerates development by providing reusable UI components. It helps improve accessibility by building standards into the system from the ground up. It streamlines A/B testing, and it ultimately strengthens their overall brand identity. They've even started integrating AI into their DLS, for instance, using it to help users find listings with specific features, like pet-friendly rentals, more easily.
Okay, a comprehensive design system is definitely key for a global platform like that, maintaining consistency. What was the challenge you mentioned?
It's a fascinating example, actually, of that tension between balancing design innovation and fundamental usability. A while back, they introduced a rather unique UI element for selecting trip duration. Some users affectionately, or perhaps mockingly, started calling it the dial thingy.
The dial thingy, okay.
Yeah. While it was certainly visually distinct and maybe intended to be playful or delightful, a significant number of users apparently found it confusing and unintuitive to operate. People reported mistaking it for selecting the start date, or just feeling it lacked the precise control offered by a standard familiar date picker calendar view.
Ah, so the unique visual style potentially harmed the actual usability, the core task.
That seems to be the core criticism, yes. Some felt its unique appearance was kind of overdressed for what it does, adding unnecessary cognitive load because it was unfamiliar. It directly contradicted the well-established mental models people have built up over years of interacting with standard date selection widgets online. It essentially forced users to pause and reformat their brain, so to speak, just for this one specific interaction. And from a development standpoint, building and maintaining a custom component like that is often far more complex and time-consuming than using a standard, well-tested one. It's a powerful illustration that while striving for unique or novel UI can be appealing, if it significantly deviates from familiar patterns without a very clear usability benefit, it can actually backfire and create friction in the user experience.
That's a really great lesson there. So a strong design system creates a solid foundation for consistency and efficiency. But pushing novelty in UI too far, especially for core tasks, can harm the user experience if it contradicts those deeply ingrained user behaviors and mental models.
Absolutely. Novel interfaces, especially for common tasks, need really rigorous usability testing. You have to be sure the perceived benefit outweighs the cost of breaking a user's existing mental model. It just highlights that constant negotiation designers face between pushing the boundaries of design innovation and ensuring fundamental usability and efficiency for the user.
These examples really help ground the concepts. Okay, so for someone listening who finds all this fascinating and is maybe thinking about getting into the field, what skills would you say are really essential for UI/UX design today?
You definitely need a diverse blend of skills. It's technical, it's creative, and perhaps most importantly, it involves strong soft skills. On the technical and creative side, proficiency with industry standard design tools is a must. Figma is huge right now, but also Adobe XD, Sketch. A strong understanding of visual design principles, color theory, typography, layout is absolutely critical for UI work.
Right, the fundamentals.
Interaction design, understanding how animations, transitions, and gestures can guide users and provide feedback is key. Core practical skills include wireframing and prototyping at various levels of fidelity, from lo-fi sketches to hi-fi interactive mock-ups. You need to know how to conduct user research and usability testing effectively. Understanding information architecture for structuring content logically is vital, and designing for responsive interfaces that work across different screen sizes is standard now. Basic coding knowledge, maybe HTML and CSS, is often beneficial, not usually to code the final product, but for more effective communication with developers.
So it's definitely not just about being artistic. It's very analytical and structured in many ways. What about the soft skills you mentioned?
The soft skills are arguably foundational, especially for user-centered design. Empathy is paramount, truly being able to understand and design from the user's perspective, stepping into their shoes. Strong communication skills are vital for everything from conducting user research interviews to presenting your design rationale to stakeholders to effectively receiving and giving feedback and collaborating daily with engineers, product managers, and other team members. Problem solving is, well, at the very heart of the job, that's what designers do. Collaboration with those cross-functional teams is non-negotiable in most environments. Given the rapid pace of technology change, adaptability and a genuine commitment to continuous learning are absolutely essential. And of course, particularly for UI, attention to detail is crucial in crafting those polished visual experiences. There's a definite trend towards demanding a more hybrid skill set designers who are not just skilled visual or interaction creators, but also strong strategic thinkers, capable researchers, and excellent communicators.
That's a really comprehensive set of skills. What about education and training? Is a traditional design degree absolutely required to get into this field?
That's a common question. While many successful designers do have degrees in related fields like graphic design, psychology, HCI, or computer science, a formal degree isn't strictly mandatory. UX is inherently interdisciplinary, drawing from so many different fields, and honestly, no single degree perfectly covers everything. Employers often prioritize demonstrated talent and skill set, particularly as showcased through your portfolio over specific academic credentials.
Okay, so what are some common pathways people take into the field then, if not always a traditional degree?
There are many routes these days. Intensive design boot camps or certificate programs have become really popular alternatives to traditional degrees, offering focused, practical training in a shorter amount of time. Industry-recognized certifications like the Google UX Design Professional Certificate on Coursera or courses offered by the Interaction Design Foundation, ISDF, are highly recommended. They tend to focus heavily on practical skills and helping you build that crucial portfolio. Platforms like Udemy, Career Foundry, or Skillshare also offer numerous courses on specific design skills or tools. And the self-taught path is also possible, though it requires significant discipline to structure your own learning, find projects, and build connections.
And practical experience is essential too, I assume. You can't just learn theory.
Oh, invaluable. Internships, freelance projects, or even volunteer work for nonprofits or small businesses are excellent ways to gain real-world experience. It's not just about using the tools, it's about navigating the complexities of project work, dealing with feedback, collaborating with others, understanding constraints. Entry-level jobs typically look for some demonstrated experience, often in that 0 to 2-year range, even if it's from personal projects or internships. And as we said, continuous learning is crucial throughout your entire career. This field never stands still.
Speaking of getting a job, you mentioned the portfolio is crucial. What makes a compelling portfolio that actually gets you noticed?
Your portfolio is absolutely your primary tool for getting hired. Think of it as your visual resume and, more importantly, proof of your skill set and thinking process. The key is quality over quantity. Showcase maybe 3 to 6 of your absolute strongest projects. Include a mix, if possible, original work you've done if you have it, and perhaps some carefully executed redesigns or conceptual projects. Just be crystal clear about your role and the context, especially if it's a redesign or a team project.
And what should each project actually show? It's not just the final pictures, right?
Exactly. The backbone of a good portfolio are detailed design case studies. For each project, you need to tell a compelling story. Clearly explain the problem you were trying to solve. Walk the viewer through your design process, step by step. Show your research, your initial sketches, your wireframes, how you iterated on ideas based on feedback or testing, any usability testing you conducted. Discuss the challenges you faced along the way and how you overcame them. And then present your final solution. Employers really want to see your problem-solving approach, your critical thinking, and your iterative process just as much as, if not more than, the final polished visuals.
Ah, okay. So they want to understand how you think and work, not just what the final screen looks like. That's key.
Precisely. Also, make sure to include a brief personal bio, clear contact information, and links to your LinkedIn profile, or maybe platforms like Dribbble or Behance if you use them to showcase work. When presenting your portfolio, remember that the portfolio website itself should demonstrate good UX principles, make it easy to navigate, visually appealing, and performant. If you worked on projects as part of a team, be very specific and honest about your individual contributions. And finally, keep it updated. Add new projects as you complete them and refine your existing case studies.
That's fantastic, really practical advice for anyone looking to build their portfolio. Let's quickly touch on tools and resources before we wrap up. What are the go-to software tools people should probably be familiar with right now?
Right. The industry landscape for tools is always evolving, but there's definitely a strong trend towards cloud-based collaborative tools these days. For all-in-one design and prototyping, Figma is currently the dominant player, largely due to its real-time collaboration features and cross-platform accessibility. But Adobe XD and Sketch, which is Mac-only, are also still widely used and very powerful. For simpler, quicker wireframing, tools like Balsamic are great for that intentionally low-fidelity, sketchy feel early on, while some newer tools like UzArt are exploring AI integration to speed things up. For more advanced, high-fidelity prototyping with complex interactions, tools like Proto.io or UXPin offer robust features. Marvel is often considered good for beginners, and Origami Studio, originally from Facebook, is used for really complex, detailed interaction design.
Got it. What about research and collaboration?
Yeah, for user research and testing, tools like Hotjar are popular for generating heat maps and recording user sessions on live websites. Maze integrates directly with design tools like Figma to allow for unmoderated remote usability testing of prototypes, which is super useful. And for collaboration and handoff, Miro is fantastic for virtual whiteboarding and brainstorming sessions, while Zeppelin is a very popular tool specifically designed to bridge the gap between designers and developers, making the handoff process smoother by providing specs, assets, and code snippets.
So the trend is definitely towards more collaborative workflows. And it sounds like AI is starting to creep in more too.
Yes, exactly, which only underscores the growing importance of those soft skills we talked about earlier, particularly communication and collaboration, as designers work more closely with distributed teams and potentially AI-assisted tools.
And for learning resources beyond those certifications we mentioned earlier, any book recommendations or communities?
Absolutely. In addition to the great certifications from Google, IXDF, and others, platforms like Udemy, Career Foundry, and Skillshare host countless courses on specific design skills, tools, or concepts. You can find almost anything. For foundational reading that's still incredibly relevant and insightful, you really can't go wrong with classics like The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman,
A must read.
or even older but still relevant books like Designing for People by Henry Dreyfuss. Engaging with online communities can also be really valuable. Reddit's RUX design subreddit is very active. Platforms like Dribbble or Behance are great for inspiration and seeing what others are doing, and joining professional organizations can provide networking and learning opportunities. But ultimately, remember that learning is an active process. Don't just passively consume content. You have to build things, reflect on your work, seek feedback, and collaborate with others to truly grow.
Okay, as we start to wrap up this first deep dive of the UX cast, what would you say are the non-negotiable, essential best practices that every UI UX designer should really try to live by in their work?
If you boil it all down, there are several core principles that really underpin all good design work, I think. First and foremost, always start and end with a user-centered approach. Deeply understand your users through research, involve them throughout the design process whenever possible, strive for consistency and familiarity both visually and functionally, leverage established patterns and align with user mental models to reduce learning curves, prioritize accessibility from the outset, design for everyone. It's not an edge case or an add-on, it's fundamental. Actively work to minimize cognitive load by making interfaces simple, clear, predictable, and well organized. Embrace iterative design, accept that your first idea is rarely perfect and that design is a continuous process of refinement based on feedback and learning. Actively seek user feedback through various methods like usability testing before launch and monitoring usage data and feedback channels after launch. Remember to always balance user needs with business goals. Successful design supports both. And finally, ensure clear hierarchy and intuitive navigation so users can easily find what they need and understand where they are within the product at all times.
Those principles really provide a robust framework, don't they? It goes way beyond just making things look nice.
They absolutely do. They elevate design beyond just aesthetics or basic functionality. They incorporate critical elements like societal impact through accessibility and ethical considerations and commercial viability through aligning with business objectives. Adhering to these practices consistently helps designers become not just executors, but true strategic partners in shaping the success of products, the well-being of users, and ultimately the reputation of the organizations they work for.
Wow. Okay. We've journeyed from ancient Greek ergonomics all the way to the cutting edge of AI-driven interfaces, from the deep psychology of perception to the specifics of design software like Figma, from the breakneck speed of startups to the complexities of enterprise scale. That was a truly deep dive into the distinct yet connected worlds of UI and UX design.
We've definitely seen that these two disciplines, while distinct in their focus, are fundamentally intertwined and absolutely essential in shaping the digital world we all inhabit every single day. And as we touched on, the field is incredibly dynamic, constantly being pushed forward by new technologies, which demands curiosity and a commitment to continuous learning from everyone involved.
And it seems the future of design remains firmly user-centric, requiring that unique blend of technical skill, deep empathy, strategic thinking, and collaborative spirit to build products that are not just functional or usable, but truly enhance people's lives in meaningful ways.
Indeed, well said.
So, here's a thought to leave you with as you go about your day. As you navigate your digital world, maybe seamlessly skipping intros on your favorite streaming service like we talked about, or perhaps struggling to book that perfect vacation rental, or even just interacting with your smart home devices, take a moment to consider the countless unseen decisions, big and small, that went into shaping your specific experience. And thinking ahead, with the rapid rise of AI becoming more integrated into our interfaces, or the increasing presence of augmented and virtual reality, how might the very way you interact with the digital world fundamentally change in the near future? And what entirely new kinds of unseen decisions will designers need to grapple with to craft your future digital experiences?
Definitely something to ponder the next time you pick up your phone or put on a headset.
Thank you so much for joining us for this very first deep dive on the UX Cast. We really hope it gave you some valuable clarity on UI and UX and maybe sparked a few aha moments along the way.
Yeah, maybe take a closer look at the design that's all around you.
And perhaps explore some of these concepts further on your own. We'll be back soon with another deep dive.